welcome to Cornell Cooperative Extension of Westchester County's 2022 Home Gardening Lecture Series. This is the Art of Pruning, and we'll begin right now. Just a few reminders that the audience members are muted, and you can type your questions in the Q&A that's located on your screen, and we'll answer as many as possible. If there's not time, you can always contact us at our office or email us.
So welcome everybody to the Art of Pruning. Nice to be here today. And I do have a lot of slides, so, let's just get started. First of all, this, I'm sure people might want to know, this is Great Dixter in England, a beautiful place to see great pruning. And, whoops. Okay, why prune? Okay, to remove dead and disease and broken branches, to remove undesirable growth, to create strong structure, to control size, to influence fruit and flowering, rejuvenate old plants, prevent damage to life and property, and to even shape plants in artificial forms, which I'll get to a little bit at the end, because I do love that. I'm going to start a little bit on trees. Let's see, because I think everybody needs to know a little bit about how to properly prune a tree. You're not going to be doing it yourself. You're going to be hiring an arborist, but it is good to know the proper ways that an arborist would prune, because not all arborists are certified arborists. So that would be a suggestion, advice to hire a certified arborist from the ISA, International Society of Arboriculture. And okay, tree structure, the single leader habit is really the strongest, and because all of the branches are attached to the main leader, and there are the joints have a stronger structure than, let's say, this type of tree, which is multi-leader codominant stems, where there's not just one stem, there's many dominant stems. And when you need to prune, when pruning is done on a tree, you always prune to outside the collar. The collar is the annual overlapping of branch and trunk wood, a distinct swelling on the bottom, sides, and top of a branch. So this is where you would prune. Look for the collar on a tree and prune outside the collar. And this is another example. Not here is a smaller collar, maybe not so visible, but this is where you would properly prune. And over time, this is the way a properly pruned tree branch heals or closes, with more of a circular donut kind of a look on the branch, as opposed to, well, a flush cut, which would be cutting into the collar, which opens up the tree to disease and fungus and pests. Okay. Enough about trees. This is mostly a shrub pruning class or lecture. So I'll get right into the shrub pruning basic cuts, which everybody always asks about. And yes, we usually prune on an angle. The thought is so that any rainwater can slide off the tip of where you pruned away from the bud. So this is a little too high from where you would prune. This is a little too close to a bud to prune, but this is about right, 1/4 of an inch. And okay, so this is the different leaf patterns on here. I'm gonna see if I could change. I don't know if you could see what I'm seeing on my screen. But okay. Anyway, as you may or may not know, all shrubs, trees have one of three main leaf patterns, which is alternate leaves. They alternate on either side up the branch. They're opposite one another, or they're whorled. For instance, like a rhododendron would be a whorled leaf. And where you properly cut on a alternate leaf arrangement would be pruning to an outside bud. So let's say this is your shrub, many branches. You would look for an outward facing bud and cut right above it and do your sideways cut right there. So it would be cutting there, not to here. If you cut to here, a branch will form from this bud, or this could be a branch, and it'll form to the outside, which is what you want, not facing inward, which is eventually going to be a crossing branch. So you prune to an outward facing bud, and on opposite leaf arrangements, you would prune to right above the leaf arrangement. This is a little high, but it's the illustration, but you would prune to right above here. And then what would happen is your leaves and your branches start growing from there. And on a whorled leaf arrangement, you would prune right above the whorl. You don't want a big stub, so you keep it very close to where the whorl was, as in the first picture that I showed. And okay, so where you cut, this is what I emphasize a lot when I teach the classes. I say where you cut is where it will grow. So it's always best to cut inside the shrub as opposed to on the outside of the shrub. And okay, so good cuts versus bad cuts, selective pruning. So, okay, so this is an illustration of bad pruning cuts, a non-selective. It would be, for instance, if you took a pair of head shears, which often happens when, gardeners or, homeowners cut their shrubs. They just take hedge clippers and prune the top of the shrub in a non-selective way. You're not selecting a specific branch to cut. You're cutting pretty much everything at once. And so it may look fine right after clipping, but soon after, usually within a couple of weeks, you'll get growth right from where you made that cut. And if you cut over and over again, you repeat this every year, you will have a very dense outer layer of greenery, of leaves. And what happens is the inside of the shrub starts to lose its leaves and eventually die. So you get a lot of dead branches on the inside. The better choice would be good prunings cuts would be selective cuts, meaning you would select where to cut. So same shrub, instead of taking hedge clippers or electric shears, you would selectively take off the height of some of it, maybe some of the density of it, and we will definitely get into that, how to do it. But you would prune it to inside the shrub as opposed to on the outs, just making cuts on the outside. So afterwards looks somewhat similar, it's shorter, and then it's going to grow into a more naturalistic pattern. And as you're removing, you're also opening it up to light and sunlight where the whole shrub will keep green, not just the outside. So this is what you want, for instance, in a forsythia, not that. Okay, so how to get started pruning. So you have a shrub and the shrub needs pruning. So where do I start? You always start with dead wood. And sometimes that, if you haven't pruned the shrub in a long time, the dead wood there could be a lot of dead wood on a shrub, in which case, if that takes you sometimes a half an hour to remove all the dead wood on an old shrub that hasn't been worked on in a while, or maybe it has a lot of dead wood on the interior because it's been sheared, just take out the dead wood. Okay, then after that, you can step back and look and start taking out the crossing branches that grow in the wrong direction. So for instance, if it's a vertical kind of branch arrangement, and you have a lot of horizontal branches, for instance, I'm thinking of a double file viburnum, they're more horizontal, and there's a lot of vertical branches. You can take off the ones that are vertical, or if it's a vertical, vase-like shrub, and there's a lot of horizontal branches, you can look to take those off. And it's something you can visualize more when you're actually looking at a shrub. And standing and looking at a shrub is really, it's something we do all the time. And then after that, you can take out excess branches that grow right next to one another, unproductive branches that don't look like they'll ever amount to anything. Maybe they're the wrong color, maybe they're thinner than a pencil is the advice I've heard a lot. Crowded branches, but no more than 1/3 of live wood per year. So you take out all the dead and then you start counting. And it's judgment, how much of 1/3 is, but you don't want to take out half, because the shrub needs the wood, the leaves to photosynthesize, and taking out too much of at any more than once a year is going to have, the shrub is going to have problems growing. So okay, so after that, step back and look often, which is something we do a lot of. Beyond that, we call lifting the skirt. So sometimes the bottommost branches you can remove, and I'm just talking about 5 inches off the bottom. Just, it makes it look better where the branches don't hang into the soil below. If there's an ever so slight gap between the bottom of the shrub and the ground. Think air circulation, you're going deep, so this way you're removing a whole branch and now sunlight is going to penetrate the center. The goal would be to see through the shrub. Some shrubs, not all, but a lot of deciduous shrubs, you would kind of want to see through it. And I have pictures where you could see what I'm talking about, with a nice symmetrical structure. We always prune with the apex in the middle and the sides tapered down. It's just the way shrubs normally grow. And then create definition between shrubs, so no overlapping. Usually by the time we're finished pruning, shrubs aren't touching their neighbor shrubs. There may only be several inches of a gap between shrubs, but and that they'll fill in over the year, but usually I don't want a shrub touching its neighbor. So, okay, now tools, a little bit on tools. People always like to know what was our favorite tools. The one we use most often is the ARS VS8 secateurs. And we like these a little better than the Felcos because we find that Felcos get stuck. They have a solid spring here instead of an open spring. So we just find these fit our hands better too. Always have a holster to put your secateurs in so you're not laying them on the ground. When the shrub is or the branch is too big to use secateurs, we use a folding saw, and our favorite is the Silky Pocket Boy saw. And both of these you can get on Amazon. So it didn't used to be that way. They were specialty items that you could only order from certain sources, but they're on Amazon now. So Silky Pocket Boy, the teeth on here are, first of all, it's Japanese steel in both cases. It's very strong steel. You can replace the blade on this, which we do maybe, once a year, I would say. So most people won't have to replace the blades very often at all. But the teeth are double teeth, and they work on the pull. So, but after a while, you get into a rhythm of sawing, and it's a tool. These tools we use most often. We have the holster in our front pocket, the pocket boy in our back pocket, and very often that's all we need to prune a whole property. I do like these washable gloves because every time I wash my gloves every single time at the end of the day. So I don't want to transfer any disease from one property to another. So those I like. Head shears we use on boxwood, but that's about all. We'll use it on, and certain boxwood, not all boxwood, but if somebody wants a beautiful sphere or a pyramid, you do need a straight line. And these are ARS hedge clippers. Also, stay really sharp. And we carry around a little spray bottle of alcohol, which we spray starting every session, or if we prune something that, may have a little disease, we'll always spray and wipe our clippers and the pocket boy down. These are two other little tools I use, for all the perennials. I find this is a great tool. I always would prune my ornamental grasses, around a month from now or so, and it takes a lot of work. But this scythe, or it's rice cutter, has a couple of different names. I get it from a company in England, actually, but you may be able to find something similar here. But I do love this tool for cutting down perennials, for cutting ornamental grasses. It's so much easier than using secateurs or the head shears, or even loppers. We don't really use loppers much because they don't fit in a pocket. So, we find that these are good enough. Lastly, this is a sharpener that, we do use. Let's see. Yes, there are, I don't think I have a slide on how to sharpen your tools, but I will say there is a couple of good ones I like. I think it's Newaki. This company here has a little video on how to sharpen your tools. And I think I liked the Impatient Gardener too. She has like an 11-minute video or something on how to sharpen your tools, which I thought were pretty good. Okay, then there's this. These are kind of redundant. Like I said, we don't use loppers much. This is head shears. This we use a lot. This is a Home Depot tool, Fiskars pruning stick, I think it's called. And we use it for getting tall branches that, we just can't reach from the ground. I do use an orchard ladder. Wouldn't really recommend that for people, but it helps us get into a shrub because it has 3 legs instead of 4. Okay, plant habit. My favorite pruning guide is this one that is not always mentioned, but someone from NYBG turned me on to Cass Turnbull years ago, and her book is my favorite pruning book. It's more conversational. It's actually funny. But the most important thing is that she puts all shrubs into one of three categories. And even if you don't know what the shrub is, it'll fit into one of the three categories. And she talks about how to prune it. So her three categories are mounding, which are kind of the blobs of the world, she says, cane growing, canes that grow from the ground. A blob could be a spirea. That is your typical mounding shrub. Cane growing shrubs are canes that grow from the ground, such as forsythia. And lastly is tree-like, which would be more specimen types of plants, a rhododendron, viburnums, and each require a unique approach. So okay, so starting off with mounding shrubs, spirea. So, okay, so mounding, what are they? They're easy, I guess, the easiest maybe to prune. They're blobs, as I said, and this is her description, they're more wide than tall, used in mass plantings. And they have the biggest pruning budget, which you can take the most out of them than the other two categories. And like I said, it would be a spirea, a boxwood, yews, hollies, potentilla, St. John's wort or hypericum, abelia. These are all examples of mounding shrubs. And you take out the dead. That's what I'm always going to say. And then you start looking at it and deciding how you want it to fit into your garden. So take out the branches that are too thin or too old or the fattest, the tallest, the crossing, and always cut stems inside at a healthy branch or a bud. Okay, no more than 1/3 live per year. So I'll get into some pictures. So this is a spirea, and just about all of my pictures were taken at the botanical gardens, which I feel does impeccable pruning. The New York Botanical Gardens, I love looking around there. They really, just the shrubs themselves have guided me so much on how to prune something properly. And I often tell people, go there in April and look in the perennial garden. That's the garden right outside the big conservatory. And everything will have been pruned by then, and you'll see a lot of shrubs that are, first of all, beautiful garden shrubs to have and typical maybe of what you have already. And they'll have been pruned, but yet they haven't leafed out yet. So it's a great way to see good pruning. Take your camera, take pictures of them, and then you can study them, like I have later on. So, okay, so this is a spirea that has not been pruned yet, as compared to this, which is, so this is a mounding shrub. You can see maybe that all the dead wood has been taken out. Crossing branches are taken out. You can see the dead wood maybe in the different color, of the wood. And it'll be the same on yours. This is, older wood is more gray, the newer wood is more brown. And yes, this would take a long time to prune, but once you prune it, very often if your shrub hasn't been pruned in a while, the first year will take a long time, but then after that, much less, if you do it on a yearly basis anyway. So this is a holly, an Ilex preserve, and this is after pruning. So going back, the way I would approach this to get it to look kind of like that sphere look, and this is only a year out of pruning, so it doesn't even look that bad, but I do like it in a, round shape. It just fits that particular shape well. So where would I start? After the dead wood, you would take out the longest branches and bring them in and cut to where is somewhere inside where it meets a healthy branch or a healthy bud. And then you'd go to the next tallest and bring it in and work your way around the shrub. At each branch that's sticking out, you're going to prune it to inside the shrub. And in the end, you'll have this kind of look, because you're taking off the ones that are the longest in this case, and bringing them inside the shrub, and you'll be left with branches that haven't been touched. So these were branches that I haven't pruned the outside of this. This is just removing all the branches that were longer, that had grown too long. This is another mounding shrub. And again, let's say you wanted it this height. So you would work your way around to the longest, tallest, go in, cut it on the inside. And then it could take you, this could take us, at least 20 minutes maybe to get this pruned. But this particular shrub, I don't think has been pruned in a while. So, and then you can do it in moderation. If you don't have time to prune, it, to get it really short, let's say you don't even need it at that short. You just want to open it up and get some sunlight on the interior. Just start from the oldest branches, tallest branches, and cut them inside the shrub. Potentilla, same thing. This is Ilex glabra, kind of work the same way. This doesn't really need that much pruning, but and take out the dead wood. You would always start with that. Okay, next is cane growing. What are they? Okay, canes that grow individually from the ground. The shrubs are usually more tall than wide. So again, think forsythia. They're vase-like, so they're narrow at the bottom and then they're wider at the top. They can be coppiced, which means cut entirely back to the ground. And they have a mid-pruning budget. So not as much as the mounding, but you could take a lot out of these as well. For instance, forsythia, red twig dogwoods, beautyberry or calocarpas, itea, hydrangea macrophyllus are examples. So always start with the dead, branches that are too thin or too fat, the oldest or fattest, tallest crossing, and again, cut to the ground or cut to the, follow the branch back inside the shrub to where it meets a healthy branch or a bud. So, okay, this is Coralopsis, again at the Botanical Gardens before, and that's after. So you can hopefully see that it's actually the same shrub. I think it actually was a couple of years apart, but you could see oldest, fattest, take that out. And you may be able to see they have pruned them way down to the ground, not 6 inches or 12 inches where they'll start to grow up here. I like to have them disappear. And you can see that here, that whoops, just going back a little bit. There's many branches here that could be taken out. And then you're leaving room for the younger branches to take over. Certainly not all of these big branches, but, a crossing one here, maybe, well, it would be sporadically throughout the shrub. And in the end, I always say that you can visualize the shrub, cut it down the middle, and the left side should look the same as the right side. So, red twig dogwoods here. Let's say this, I mean, these really don't need a lot of pruning, but every year a red twig dogwood needs to be pruned so that the new wood is red. Some people have red twig dogwoods that are years old and the branches have darkened and they're almost, gray. But if you prune it on a yearly basis, you'll get red stems in the winter, which is the nicest part about having that shrub. You can take in the canes down to the ground, start with the tallest, fattest, maybe take it to here if you don't want to take the whole cane out. Or you can, again, start with the tallest, follow it down. Let's say if you want to take it all the way down, just cut it down to here, cut it to the base. Or if you're at a point where it's getting thin, maybe you just want to take a branch down to, partially down to there. Calicarpa, here's another one that this is kind of it's the same shrub. This is the before and after. You could see that the oldest, fattest ones were taken out. The crossing branches were taken out. And in the end, it has a symmetrical look. You could say the left side is pretty much mirrors the right side. Okay, hydrangea macrophylla. Whoops. This is the before, and that would be after. So these are the pink or the blue ones, which people are often confused about, or they sometimes the gardeners come along and prune them wrong, which means you'll get no flowers for the year. So they bloom on the tips, the terminal bud of each cane. Each flowering stem has a terminal bud, which means the tip bud, and that tip bud will be its flower. It doesn't have a flower in the middle of the cane. It may branch, and then the branch also has a tip bud, and that's where another flower will be. But so you don't want to cut the tips off of these. Sometimes people come along and, gardeners come along and clip the whole thing in half. They have cut off all the buds for that year. And the buds formed the year before on the pink or the blue type, the macrophylla. So then you've cut off all the buds. So how do you prune this? Well, the way we prune it is we thin it out. We thin out the canes that are, if it's too tall and it's blocking a window or whatever, we'll take the tallest branches and prune them all the way down again to the base. I want them to disappear. We'll, of course, always take out the dead wood, the broken branches. That's done first. After you do that, step back and look. Maybe it may not need anything, but if it does, you could just start by taking off the tallest branches. Or if it's too wide, you could remove the branches because they do sort of sucker and widen at the base. So if you want a smaller footprint, take off the branches that are outside where you want it to grow. And at the botanical gardens, they do just take off the flower tip, around now. But you have to be careful not to go more than just the flower, just the old flower. And you may want to leave it till it warms up a little bit just to protect them. And in the end, this is what it looks like. And that's why they look beautiful in the winter, because they have, can have nice structure just without all the crossing branches. This is a cane grower. This is a different type of spirea, Thunbergii, and I just put that in as an example. Like, where would you start on that? You can't possibly start on the outside of this shrub. You would really, the way we would prune it is just take out canes from the bottom, and that'll thin it out. And each time you take out a cane, step back and look at it, make sure you're not taking them all out from one side. And but actually the Botanical Gardens does like this shrub very full. So it's your choice. Okay, tree-like, what are they? They're often specimen plants, branches that divide many times. They're woodier, more elegant, tidier habit, more tall than wide, and they have the smallest pruning budget. So they're viburnum and rhododendron, andromeda, lilac, hydrangea paniculata, which are the limelight hydrangeas, the white flowers, amelanchier. Again, start with the dead, oldest, fattest. Well, let's just go into what it might be. Okay, so a lilac, you want a lilac to have a lot of stems and branches, because more stems and branches, the more flowers you'll get. But this again is at the Botanical Gardens, thin them out. Sometimes they need thinning out. So this one, for instance, okay, if you were working on this, you could see the difference in the wood color that are here. And let's say that one, and you would saw that out to the ground. But if it didn't need that much sawing to the ground, or then you were thinking it's too tall, the blooms are 12 feet off the ground, we like to keep the shrub about 7 feet. So you would go in and take some of the branches down to, where it would meet a healthy branch. Take this branch down into the shrub and cut it down here, and work your way through the shrub so that it looks even in the end, which of course this does. It's a beautiful example. Again, the Botanical Gardens are beautiful shrubs that will show you how to prune. Viburnums, often they have many stems, so you have to kind of cut out some of the older stems, and as you can see, it's been pruned way down to the base here. This looks like a water sprout. You could take that out. Water sprouts are straight up and skinny and don't really branch. And then open it up, cut some of the branches to the, shorten some of the branches. And I'm going through this quickly. Pruning has taken us, years to learn how to do it. I would say get the Cass Turnbull book, look at good pruning. This is an hour shrub, and like I said, I've been doing this for years, and it's taken me years to figure out how to do good pruning. So, but this is a little guide. Anyway, okay, rhododendron. Your rhododendron may have 10 canes. As you can see, this one has about 3 or 4 or 5. So reduce the number of canes, and then if this is too wide, take it in. Rhododendrons can almost be viney, so they can just keep growing long. Take a branch in, cut it, take another branch in and cut it. Keep going around the shrub and working your way into the interior. This one, let's say, is too long. Find an interior place to cut it. So, but in the end, it should have a symmetrical shape. Oak leaf hydrangea. This is a before and an after. As you can see, it's nicely thinned out. Amelanchias often get many canes that they rub against one another, and over years they almost fuse. So remove canes to the ground, and then if it's too tall, take a branch down to where another branch can take over. Japanese maples, a lot of people have Japanese maples. I'm not going to get into it, but Cass Turnbull has a good YouTube video. You pretty much sit underneath it and prune from the bottom up and the inside out. I could never imagine pruning this from the outside first. It's usually a lot of dead wood in there, and this is a beautiful one at the Botanical Gardens that has a nice structure. Just a lot of dead wood. So, okay, timing on pruning. The most important question will be, does it bloom on old wood or does it bloom on new wood? So it blooms on, if it blooms on old wood, which is meaning the previous year's wood, you prune it after bloom. So, and that is most shrubs, rhododendron, azalea, regelia, forsythia, lilac, hydrangea macrophylla, as I mentioned, witch hazel, and so on. So you would prune those after bloom. That's the best, right after bloom. They say within 6 weeks you should prune it, because then it starts putting on buds for next year. So and if it blooms on new wood, this year's wood, prune before bloom. So the things that bloom on new wood is most roses, not the old species roses, but most roses are done around when the forsythia bloom. Summer blooming shrubs, which would be the hydrangea paniculata and arborescens, rose of Sharon, abelia, hypericum, privet, potentilla, spirea. If you're not sure when it blooms, then just Google it. And, you know, when does a forsythia bloom, you know, or does it bloom on new wood or old wood? So, and certainly you can get a good guide. A lot of people have those limelight hydrangeas. This is how I saw how to prune it at the botanical gardens. They take the buds because it blooms on new wood. You can do this in now, or you can do it anytime up through, I'd say, you know, mid-April would be a good time. And prune it, they prune it to sort of a V, and they take out the middle branch, I believe, and it's 2 buds worth. And this is what it looks like kind of close up. And that makes a really beautiful shrub, because they can get very heavy with the blossoms. So, and they only have a couple of canes here. So, but they're nice and sturdy. That old, you want sturdy canes and branches to hold up those flowers. And again, this is a shorter variety, little lamb. That's the way it's pruned. Silver plants are pruned in April: butterfly bush, caryopteris, lavender, Russian sage. I find that in our climate, wait till they leaf out ever so slightly, then you can tell where to prune them. Butterfly bushes bloom on new wood. You can cut those down just like this to about 12 inches in, I'd say, April. Roses, this is an ideal way a rose should look, very thinned out, so you don't get black spot and disease. And prune roses before the new growth, so you're not pulling off buds as you're pruning. Okay, pruning calendar, March through July, when most shrub pruning occurs. That's when we're working, starting in mid-March, working through July. August and September, no heavy pruning, only dead or damaged wood, because you would be initiating growth, which won't necessarily harden off by the first frost. Late October through December, we go out and do a little minor pruning. We know that there's not going to be a lot of growth at that point, so just to tidy up the garden. Winter, we don't prune in the winter, but it would be a good time to prune oaks, and I did want to put that in there. Oaks shouldn't be pruned during the growing season because of oak wilt. So prune oaks only during the dormant season. And anytime, however, you can take out the 5 Ds: dead, dying, diseased, damaged, or deformed. Special cases, rehabilitative pruning. If your shrub needs a lot of pruning, do it early. You know, first year, the first year, allow it to grow. The second year, do some thinning. The third year, you should see big improvement. And if it's really awful looking, then cut it all the way to the ground. This could be a case for cutting a Wigelia all the way to the ground. It would just take too long to prune. And very often shrubs come back. I mean, you have to be willing to lose it, but because it may not come back. But this is a 50-year-old Weigela from a friend of mine who is 50 years old, and yet it looks beautiful. So you can rehabilitate shrubs rather than digging up and getting rid of them. Water sprouts are, as I said, straight up skinny growths that should be cut off. If there's that many, just cut them off in moderation. I think Cass says take off a third, leave a third, shorten a third, but they will come back. Suckers, always remove. Their suckers originate from the ground, so remove all of those. Hedges, I'll just run through this quickly because I know we're running out of time and I want to have time for questions. Okay, if you desire a lot of growth, prune early. The earlier you prune, the more growth you'll get. So, and that goes for all shrubs pretty much. Yeah, if your shrub needs a lot of work, prune it early, you'll have April, May, June, July, August of growth time to fill in to grow more wood. If your shrubs are in good shape, then you can prune them in the summer. We prune gardens that are in good shape in June and July because we don't want them to grow a lot. You know, they already look good, and they won't put on a lot of growth if we do it later in the summer. Sheared shrubs will require more pruning than hand clipped shrubs, and occasionally on a hedge, let's say, get inside and prune out some of the older stems on like a privet or whatever your hedge might be. They say the best kind of top would not be a flat top, which in our area snow can accumulate and, you know, break branches. This is more maintenance. So this is a rounded top or conical or sphere shape would be better, stronger. And always, I see this so often, the bottom of a hedge should not be more narrow than the top. You want the sun to get to the bottom of the hedge. So if you did have a shrub that looked like this, I suppose you could come in, and you know, cut make it more look like a cylinder, I guess, for a while. So because if it's wider up here, it'll always shade out below. So maybe narrow the top or start it over. Okay, and lastly, ornamental pruning. This is just some fun things I put in. This is actually at Monet's garden, something you could do, having some apple trees as an espalier form that they used as a border. And I believe I wasn't there when they had apples, but I would assume that they do have apples. An espalier is supported by wire and stakes, but they are high maintenance. You have to prune them 3 times a year, and I'm not going to get into too much detail because I watched YouTube videos, I read up on how to do it, but espaliers can be a beautiful ornamental feature in a garden. And here's another one. If you have a big blank wall, this is a nice complement, a nice way to fill a big blank wall. But they need regular maintenance. I'd say at least twice a year they need to be trimmed in order to keep looking this way. Oh yeah, this was Chateau de Los in France, a beautiful boxwood knot garden that is, you know, this nice look is achieved through pruning. It's sort of under an over design, a parterre design. That was very, very ornamental and very neat. Yeah, this is a kind of thing that you could do, a pyramid. I love pyramids. I love topiary in a wild garden or in a regular garden. Just a something like a pyramid is a focal point. It can be a focal point in a garden. And I just found this guy's website yesterday, Fred Gonzowski Garden Home. I guess I didn't get to read it all, but it looked like he illustrated how to do a pyramid, which pretty much we put down stakes on 4 sides and they have to be evenly spaced. And head shears is our best for this kind of design. But this is giving you an idea of how to do this, not so much the directions, but I guess maybe we'll have a class on creative pruning sometime. Oh, this is in San Francisco, just really neat, very unusual, but I did think this was just dramatic, beautiful. Yeah, this I thought was very pretty. This, as in the other one, sort of cloud pruning, also beautiful hedge here that is not typical. And then the butterfly bush and the boxwoods just put together in a form that really made a very nice design. And this is out in Sagaponack, Maduce Conservancy. Okay, no pruning sealers. You don't seal cuts. You're sealing in fungus and possibly pests, so don't use that. And that's it. So thank you. And if there's any questions.
Okay, Anne, yeah, there are quite a few questions.
Okay.
Okay, let me, first of all, just the general question of people are asking, will they receive slides or that kind of thing? So we'll answer that at the end. But okay, the first question is how to cut knockout roses back in the spring. How far to cut? And is this done in April when the first buds emerge?
I find that, as I said, when the forsythia bloom is typically the time when you prune roses, but I was at the Botanical Gardens this week and they were pruning their roses. So you just want to prune before growth starts, because if you pull out branches, you're ripping off buds. So I would say, and pruning out, well, look, let's see, get out the dead wood, the crossing branches. Knockouts don't have a lot of fungus, but thin them out. Again, look at the Botanical Gardens and see. I mean, the questions are going to take a long time, but hopefully that helps a little bit. People can email me if they have questions. So
okay. How to prune a rose of Sharon that has been topped back and has all tall sprouts?
Okay, Rose of Sharon blooms on new wood, so you could do that in the spring, early spring. And you take those branches down to sort of a height you'd like to see it at, because you're right, they're the flowers, like on a lilac, sometimes can be 12 feet off the ground. You can take those canes down to a good height, even 5 feet, and thin it out, get the dead wood out, and it will bloom shorter.
Okay, thank you.
And the Botanical Gardens has a great one in the perennial garden, which that same area I was talking outside the conservancy.
Okay. If I neglected to prune my hydrangeas this past fall, do I just leave them and prune this coming fall after they bloom again?
Well, I'll assume it's the pink or the blue hydrangea, which is, the kind, if you prune at the wrong time, you won't get flowers. We do them in the spring. In the spring, they'll look like that picture that was all crowded that I had. We'll just sit down on the ground next to it and take out all the dead canes, all the crossing canes, maybe you cut a flower, so there's only a half a cane left. We'll cut all of those out, but we won't prune the tips. I'll take the old flower off sort of, more like May, just because I feel like the flower is protecting that tip bud. So yeah, we prune ours in the spring. Just we're always leaving 75% of the good canes. We're just taking out a third of the canes that are maybe too crowded or too tall or too old. You could tell by the looks very often of what's an old branch and what's a young branch.
Mhm. Okay. So just to continue on, this is a little more specific, is when would you prune lace cap hydrangeas? Would it be the same?
Lace cap, I believe, is the same, yes, as microphylla. They bloom on old wood. I mean, it could be, that endless summer bloom on old wood and new wood, but we generally don't touch the tips of the lace caps or the mop head.
Okay. How and when do you prune clematis?
I guess clematis. There's 3 different varieties. I assume she means clematis. 3 different varieties of clematis. It depends on which kind you have. Category 1, I think, blooms in early spring. You would cut that after bloom. Category 2 blooms in midsummer. You can prune those to the ground. They get very messy, and I had one for years that I was just barely. It's there. The wood is so thin that you just can break a branch so easily, and it got so old looking. I just cut it to the ground and I let it, and it grew back great. So if you have one like that, you may lose it for a year, but in the end, it'll look better if it loses all that old dead growth. Category 3, you can prune early spring up to, down to like a foot.
Okay, and I have just another question. When do you prune peach trees?
Peach trees, I would say to Google that. I think apple trees are first and pears are first. Peaches, I think, are a little bit later. I can't say I prune any peach trees. I don't. I usually give the fruit trees, other than espaliers, to arborists who specialize in fruit. But I remember Googling that, and I think peaches are a little bit later. So as I always tell people, you're not sure, Google it, but stick to extension sites, land grant universities, every state has one. I always stick to extension sites, .edu sites, .org sites, the botanical gardens, many arboretums throughout the country. Those are the sites that will give you the best advice.
Okay. Just to Amy, this is a question. There's some things in the chat room. I think we are just about out of time. It's 11 o'clock. So how would you like to proceed?
I'm happy to stay on.
Okay,
And
so,
here-
so
Can you?
okay, and if you're happy to stay on.
Well, unfortunately, we are having a problem with Amy. We can't hear her.
Yes.
But if you would like to stay on, and you said that you have some time, everyone, thank you so much for coming and being here for this presentation. I'll just say really fast that the next one is on March 30th with Jackie Bergonzi. Oh, okay. So March 30th at 10 to 11 is the next one. And can you please advance the slide?
This is all okay,
perfect. So if you want to hang out and answer a few more questions, you absolutely can. It looks like you still have a pretty big audience. So if you want to go maybe another like 5 minutes or so, answer a few more questions. Anyone who doesn't get their question answered, we will be happy to go through the questions and get back answers to everyone who we might have missed.
Okay, so Anne, what I'll do is I'm looking at some of the questions in the chat room. So I'm just going to we can do a couple of those if you
Sure.
don't mind.
No, not at all.
Okay, if you cut inside the shrub, isn't that conflicting with your advice to cut above outward facing buds?
No, every branch has an outward facing or an inward facing bud. So even if the branch is on the interior of the shrub, let's see. Okay, if it's on the left side of the shrub, let's say, cut it to a bud that's going to point to the left. And if it's on the, if you're cutting to a branch that's on the right side of the shrub, you're cutting to a bud or a branch that's going to point to the outside. So it may not click until you actually get in there and start pruning, but yeah, you're always cutting to, just remember, you're cutting to an outward facing bud. So when you get out there, it'll make more sense.
Okay. Okay, so then just along the same lines, this question is cutting outward facing branches only for trees and cutting inward facing for shrubs we want to thicken.
No, I never cut to an inward facing bud because that it's going to technically cross, that is going to lead to a crossing branch. It's an inward facing bud. So I mean, there may be an exception. I would say if you want to fill up a certain area, if there's a gap or if you left a hole or something, but generally, no, cutting to an outward facing bud is my best advice.
Okay. Would you prune rose bushes that are only a year old?
I take the dead out. You know, maybe they're only in your garden for a year, but maybe they're older. Just take the dead out, any crossing branches, I would say, right. A young shrub shouldn't need a lot of pruning, as not nearly as much as an old shrub. So yeah, maybe it doesn't need any pruning.
Okay. Any advice on pruning junipers?
Let's see, you need no head shears. You want to retain those nice pointy tips. That's the character of a juniper. You have to kind of get in. If it's too wide, look for the widest branch that's sticking out beyond where you excuse me, want it to. It's wider than you want. Take that widest branch, follow it all the way into the shrub to where it meets a healthy branch and cut it off, and do that, repeat that throughout the shrub until you have a shrub that's more to the size you want. And this way you're retaining the pointy tips on all the other branches.
And we'll take this one final question. How to prune peonies?
Oh, peonies, maybe tree peonies. Tree peonies, I believe, I mean, I'm assuming it's a tree peony because that's a kind of a shrub.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those bloom on old wood, and actually down at Rockefeller, they have that peony garden, tree peony garden, and they taught me, yeah, that this time of year we would meet and prune off just the dead wood on tree peonies. But sometimes they get a little tall, and then after they bloom, you could take them down, you know, to a healthier branch. Maybe if it's 3 feet tall, sometimes they get 4 feet tall. You can prune it down lower on the branch, but you may lose a year's worth of growth. I mean, a year's flowering on those. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I'm sure anybody at Rockefeller down there, if you're there on a day when they prune, I think they prune on Monday mornings, they could probably tell, or you could Google it. You know, that's a good Google question. How to prune tree peonies. Stick to the EDU sites or the EXT sites or ORG sites. We'll get the best advice.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.